In 1580, England was a very different place from the country we know today. The language, customs, and even the way people dressed were all far removed from modern times. Life for women, in particular, is often difficult to trace, with much of their personal history disappearing after their birth and marriage records. For many women of that time, we know little more than their names, and sometimes not even that. But by looking at the few details we do have, we can try to imagine what life was like for Anne Martyn, the youngest daughter of Nicholas and Margaret of Athelhampton. In 1580, Anne would likely have been in her teenage years, probably around 15 or 16. Her daily life would have started early, as was the custom for everyone at the time. Most people rose at dawn, but servants were expected to get up even earlier to begin the day's work. The household staff had very simple sleeping arrangements, often rolling up their mats and storing them away during the day. However, for those of higher status, such as Anne, the bed was a central part of their world. She may have shared a large four-poster bed with her older sister Jane, as they were both unmarried at this time. Once awake, Anne would begin her day with prayer. As a Catholic family, they followed a routine of prayer throughout the day, reciting the Angelus 3 times. Anne's prayer book, a gift from Cardinal Paul, who had once been vicar of Puddletown, would be by her side. After saying her prayers, it would be time to get dressed, which was a complex and time-consuming process. Anne would wear several layers of clothing. The first layer was made of linen, a fabric that could be washed, such as the smoke and partlet she would wear close to her skin. Over this, she would wear a Spanish faving, a type of cone-shaped hoop skirt made of stiffened material like bent's dried grass or bowling, a material from Wales, which kept the shape of the skirt. Next, she would put on a kirtle, a kind of dress with a bodice that helped shape and support her figure. These dresses were often laced up in the front, but in Anne's case, it may have been done at the back, which would have required a servant to assist her. To complete the look, Anne would pin a stomacher across the front of her bodice, a decorative piece that matched the kirtle's front design. Anne's outermost layer was the gown, and in this case, it was likely an English gown. The gown was open at the front to show the stomacher and bodice underneath. These layers of clothing were more than just functional. They were also a symbol of wealth and status, with the fabric and decoration showing the family's social standing. Anne's look would be finished off with a silk velvet hat, a silk girdle, and starched does at her neck and wrists. The starched does were larger and more intricate as the century progressed, becoming another way for Anne to display her family's wealth. Once dressed, Anne would perform another social ritual of the day, paying her respects to her parents. In a household of their status, showing respect was important, and Anne, as a gentlewoman, would have been expected to observe the social rules of courtesy and hierarchy. As a daughter of the gentry, Anne was trained from a young age in managing a household. This would have included keeping track of finances, overseeing food preparation, and even learning to sew. The household was a busy place, with areas like the kitchen, dairy, bakehouse, and brewhouse, all requiring attention. Anne would have also participated in some of the more hands-on tasks. Women in Tudor England, even those at court, were known to make their own preserves and manage their daily meals. One way Anne would have learned the practical skills of running a household was by being sent away to another household to serve as a page or attendant, much like an apprentice. In these places, she would have learned how to interact with different people, manage tasks, and gain experience in the responsibilities of gentry life. Needlework was another important skill for a young woman like Anne. The art of sewing was crucial for both practical and decorative purposes. Many women, even queens and noble ladies, made their own shirts and other garments. In a world without radio or television, Anne would have spent time sewing while chatting, singing, or listening to someone read aloud. Visiting other households was also a common social activity. Gentlefolks would often travel to stay with friends and family, with visits sometimes lasting several days or even weeks, depending on the distance between homes. When traveling, a gentleman would bring servants who helped care for his horse and also provided protection along the road. During one of these visits, Anne may have met Anthony Floyer, a young man from Floyers Hayes in Devon. We know from records that they later married, but at this point in 1580, Anne would have just been getting to know him as a guest in the family home. In the 16th century, marriage was not about romantic love as we understand it today. Instead, it was a strategic decision made to secure wealth, property, and family alliances. For women like Anne, marriage was a vital means of securing her future. It was less about personal affection and more about the intertwining of two families and their fortunes. Although love was not the primary motive, it was still important that the couple got along well, as the shared life they were about to begin would have been built on a foundation of companionship and mutual respect. Thus, while Anne would not have been expected to marry young, there was great emphasis on her and her future husband spending time together before the wedding to ensure they could establish a harmonious relationship. Marriage was an agreement between families, grounded in practical concerns, and for Anne this meant that by 1593 she would have been wed to Anthony Floyer, a match orchestrated to unite estates, consolidate land, and strengthen both families' social standing. This union was not just a merger of two individuals, but a merger of families with shared interests, with wealth, lineage, and position all playing significant roles. While the arrangement may have seemed businesslike, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in Anne's life, one where she would be expected to maintain the delicate balance of managing her home, nurturing relationships, and securing her position within the larger framework of society. Her role as a wife and eventually a mother would define her place in the world. The events leading up to Anne's marriage also highlighted the social norms and expectations of her time. Like many young women of her status, Anne's education extended beyond formal studies to include the art of socializing, of fitting gracefully into the world of the gentry. One of the most important skills for Anne to master was dance. In the world of Tudor nobility, courtly dance was a vital social skill, and its mastery was expected of all young women and men. Dance was not simply an entertainment. It was a way for Anne to display her grace, elegance, and poise, all of which were important in creating the right impression during social gatherings. Anne would have learned various dances, including slower ones like the pavane, which allowed for gentle conversation and subtle interaction, and faster ones like the galliard, where dancers showed off their athleticism, strength, and agility. These dances provided a structured environment in which young men and women could interact without the constraints of formal conversation, offering a chance to develop relationships and deepen mutual understanding. For Anne, the dance floor would have been both a social arena and a place to practice the delicate art of courtship, as dance partners could communicate volumes through movement, touch, and eye contact. The musical aspect of Anne's life was another essential part of her education. Music was not merely an occasional form of entertainment, but an integral part of daily life for those of her social standing. Whether played by hired musicians or by family members, music formed the soundtrack to Anne's existence. The noblewomen of the Tudor period were often skilled musicians, and Anne, too, would have likely been trained in the playing of instruments such as the lute or viol. It was considered a marker of refinement and culture for women of Anne's class to play music, and lessons in musical instruments were a significant part of their education. Anne's social life was rich with opportunities for music, whether it was at court, in the privacy of her own home, or during visits to other noble families. Music served not only as entertainment, but also as a way of showing off one's education and social standing. It was through such social events that Anne would have refined her skills in conversation, dance, and music, all of which were necessary to maintain the relationships that would uphold her family's position in society. Meals in Anne's time were grand affairs, often the highlight of the day. Dinner, the most important meal, typically took place between 10 a.m. and noon, depending on the family's schedule. The dining experience was a highly ritualized event, and the table was set with napkins and plates for each guest, reflecting the family's wealth and position. Each meal began with a grace, a prayer of thanks for the food, reflecting the deep religiosity of the time. Anne's family, being Catholic, would have likely recited a Latin grace before every meal, acknowledging both their blessings and their place in the social hierarchy. Food, in the 16th century, was not just about sustenance but also about displaying wealth and status. The grand procession of dishes brought into the dining hall was a visual showcase of the family's prosperity. Meat, spices, and sugar were often featured prominently on the menu, not just for their taste, but also for their rarity and expense. Spices were particularly valuable, used not to disguise spoiled meat, but to enhance the flavor of well-preserved and freshly prepared dishes. The presence of such ingredients signified that the family could afford high-quality food, an indicator of both wealth and social standing. Bread, too, played an important role in signaling wealth. White bread was more labor-intensive to produce than brown bread and was therefore considered a luxury. The upper crust, the most desirable part of the bread, was reserved for the most important person at the table, often the head of the household. This is where the term upper crust originates, a reflection of the rigid social stratification in Tudor society, where even the smallest details, such as the portion of bread, were used to display one's position. The meal was divided into several courses, known as removes, with each course carefully prepared and presented. The dishes were brought to the table in a grand procession, each one shown to the diners before being carved and served on individual plates. In addition to using knives and spoons, it was customary to eat with one's fingers, though diners kept their hands clean using napkins, which added an extra layer of formality to the meal. After each course, the common loaf was used to clean the plate, wiping away any remnants of food and ensuring that each plate was ready for the next course. The meal would conclude with a sweets course, which could include a variety of sugary treats, once again showcasing the family's wealth and taste for the finer things in life. At the table, the conversation would have flowed easily, punctuated by polite laughter and exchanges of pleasantries. It was during such meals that important business could be discussed, relationships strengthened, and alliances formed. For Anne, these meals were not only about nourishment, but also about maintaining the intricate web of relationships that held her world together. The social dynamics of the dining room were as important as the food itself, with every gesture, every word, every glance helping to reinforce the family status and Anne's place within that world. After the grand meal, Anne and Antony, like many young couples of their time, might have taken a walk through the gardens. In 1580, a walk in the garden wasn't just for leisure, it was an opportunity for them to get to know one another better. The gardens of a noble estate, such as Athelhampton, were not only ornamental but also functional. They were carefully designed to showcase beauty while providing practical benefits. The air would have been filled with the fragrant scents of blooming flowers, and the ground covered in neat rows of herbs, fruits, and edible flowers. Anne and Anthony would have strolled along manicured paths, perhaps chatting softly as they walked beneath the shade of apple trees, taking in the vibrant greenery around them. The beauty of the garden was a perfect setting for a quiet conversation, allowing them a private space to bond away from the formality of the dinner table. However, despite the intimacy of the moment, they would not have walked alone. At that time, privacy for young couples, especially those of noble birth, was often a luxury carefully controlled. Anne and Anthony would have been accompanied by at least one page, possibly more, who were tasked with ensuring their safety and maintaining discretion. These attendants would have been responsible for guarding the couple against any potential interruptions or dangers, as well as ensuring that the couple's actions were always in accordance with the social norms of the time. Even in the most private of settings, such as a stroll in the garden, there was always a presence that ensured proper decorum was maintained. The gardens of the Tudor period were marvels of design, with great attention paid to both their beauty and their utility. Fruit trees, such as apples and pears, were cultivated not only for enjoyment, but also for the practical need to preserve food for the coming winter months. During harvest time, the family would work together to store and preserve fruits and vegetables. Apples, for example, could be stored carefully with dried herbs or rose petals, which would help to enhance their scent and flavor, ensuring they lasted through the long, cold months. In the fall, this preservation was a crucial task, as it provided a way to ensure that the family had enough food throughout the winter. The presence of edible flowers and herbs would also have had a practical use, with many of these plants being used in cooking or medicine, further illustrating the self-sufficiency of a well-maintained Tudor estate. As Anne and Anthony walked through the gardens, they might have passed by areas where these fruits and herbs were carefully tended. The setting was more than just a beautiful escape. It was a space that embodied the hard work and resourcefulness that defined the lives of those living in the Tudor era. The care taken to preserve food, manage the crops, and ensure the gardens remained beautiful year-round was a reflection of the wealth and status of the family, but also a reminder of the effort required to maintain that wealth. For Anne and Anthony, the gardens were not only a symbol of their family's success, but also a space that allowed them to connect with the land, their heritage, and each other. Although archery was no longer a mandatory activity by 1580, it remained a popular sport and a skill that was still highly valued, particularly in the aristocratic classes. Archery was not only a recreational pastime, but also a way to maintain physical fitness and demonstrate prowess in a skill that was once vital for survival. Tudor archery ranges were common on noble estates, where both men and women would gather to practice their aim. The longbow, an iconic weapon of the period, was made from imported alpine yew, a slower-growing wood that produced a more durable and flexible bow than the native English variety.
Song. When you think about that, where the time where, for Anne and Anthony, archery might have been an occasional activity, with the two of them taking turns shooting at targets or participating in a friendly competition. Such activities were common during gatherings, as they offered an opportunity for couples and families to bond while engaging in physical activity.
Archery was a highly social sport, where the participants could show off their skills and make light-hearted conversation between turns. It was also a time when Anne, as a noblewoman, could display her own talents, proving that women in Tudor England were expected to be as adept with a bow as they were with more traditional domestic skills. In this way, archery offered a unique way to break away from the formalities of court life, while still maintaining the dignity expected of the nobility. As the day began to fade, the family would have gathered for the evening meal, or supper. Unlike the formal dinner that had taken place earlier in the day, supper was a much simpler and more informal occasion. The dinner meal, which typically started between 10 a.m. and noon, had been an elaborate affair, showcasing wealth and status through an array of intricate dishes, rare spices, and expensive meats. In contrast, supper was a quieter time, with the family coming together in a more relaxed atmosphere, often held in the parlor away from the cold and drafty great hall. Supper was a time to reflect on the events of the day, share stories, and enjoy each other's company without the formality of the midday feast. The food at supper was simpler but still thoughtfully prepared. It might consist of smaller dishes, perhaps hearty stews, cold meats, bread, and cheeses, designed to satisfy the family without the lavishness of dinner. The meal was often served in a more intimate setting, with Anne, her parents, and possibly a few close guests enjoying the meal together. As they sat around the table, the conversation was less about politics or family business and more about personal matters, stories of the day, light-hearted gossip, or plans for future events. It was a time for relaxation and connection, where the social structure of the formal dinner could be set aside and everyone could enjoy the simple pleasure of good food and companionship. Supper also allowed for a quieter moment of reflection and relaxation after a long day of responsibilities and social obligations. For Anne and Anthony, it was a chance to unwind from the pressures of courtship and formality, engaging in more meaningful conversation. The setting, more casual than the grand dinner, also allowed for greater intimacy. It was in these moments that Anne and Anthony could build a deeper connection, sharing their thoughts and feelings in a more private and comfortable environment. The evening meal was not just about food. It was about nurturing relationships, strengthening bonds, and reinforcing the sense of belonging to a family and a world that was constantly shifting and evolving. As evening falls on the grand Tudor manor, Anne Martyn prepares for bed in the privacy of her chambers. The fire in the hearth has died down to a soft glow, casting long shadows across the stone walls of her room. The heavy curtains, drawn tightly across the leaded glass windows, block out the night's chill, while the dim light from the flickering candles illuminates the simple wooden furnishings. A large four-poster bed, with its thick velvet curtains drawn back, stands at the center of the room. The bed is adorned with soft linen sheets, the fabric crisp and freshly washed, ready for her to settle in for the night. Anne undresses with the assistance of a maid, carefully removing her gown, which is made of the finest wool and velvet, the rich fabric reflecting her noble status. She is left in her undergarments, a simple linen smock and a partlet, which she will sleep in, as was common during the Tudor period. The room is modest in comparison to the grand spaces of the house, but it is filled with small touches that reflect Anne's wealth and the careful attention to detail that defines her family's household. A small chest in the corner of the room holds her clothes, neatly folded and stored, ready for the next day's wear. Beside her bed is a small wooden table with a basin and pitcher of water, a small mirror, and a prayer book, the latter a symbol of Anne's devout Catholic faith. Before going to bed, Anne says her prayers, an act that is a daily ritual, reflecting the importance of religion in her life. The prayer book, written in Latin, is ornate with gold leaf edges and delicate illustrations, a prized possession that has been passed down through the generations. As Anne finishes her prayers, she is assisted into her nightgown, the linen smock that will keep her warm through the night. The kerchief on her head is simple yet functional, ensuring that her hair remains neat overnight. The room's cool air and the soft rustling of linen sheets invite a sense of tranquility, a stark contrast to the busy, structured days she has spent managing the household or socializing with suitors. Once in bed, Anne settles in beneath the thick woolen blankets, which provide warmth during the cold Tudor nights. The four-poster bed, shared with her sister Jane in years past, is now her own, though it is still large enough to allow space for her to stretch out and sleep peacefully. The bed's dark wood frame, adorned with carvings, is a symbol of the family's wealth, but it is also a place of comfort and respite from the demands of noble life. Anne, however, is not completely alone. The quiet of the night is occasionally broken by the sound of a maid moving about the room, ensuring that everything is in its proper place, preparing for the next day. Before drifting into sleep, Anne reflects on the events of the day. She has attended to the needs of the estate, managed the staff, and participated in social gatherings that further cement her family's position within the community. These responsibilities weigh on her, but the quiet moments before sleep offer her a rare time to reflect on her own personal thoughts. She considers her upcoming marriage to Anthony Floyer, a union arranged not out of love, but for the practical benefits it will bring to both families. The marriage is a pivotal moment in Anne's life, one that will change her role within the household and society. Yet, in the silence of her chambers, she allows herself a brief moment of solitude, free from the demands of others. As Anne's thoughts drift, she is reminded of the rituals that govern her life. In the morning, she will rise early, just as she does every day, to say her prayers and prepare for the tasks ahead. Her life is carefully structured, each day a series of events that help maintain the stability of her family's estate. She will oversee the management of the household, direct the servants, and ensure that the finances are in order. Though marriage looms on the horizon, Anne knows that her role as a woman of the household is essential, and she takes great pride in her ability to manage both the practical and social aspects of her life. The peacefulness of the room, coupled with the slow burn of the fire, encourages Anne to relax and prepare for the sleep that will restore her for the day to come. Outside, the sounds of the estate settle into quiet. The rustling of the trees in the distance, the occasional bark of a dog, and the soft clinking of metal from the servants' quarters remind her of the busy world that continues to turn even as she prepares for rest. There is a sense of comfort in knowing that the estate is well managed and that her family's position remains secure, but there is also a weight to the responsibilities she must shoulder. For Anne, this is the calm before the storm. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new tasks to complete, and new interactions with those around her. But for tonight, she has allowed this moment of peace, this respite from the world outside. The final flicker of candlelight dies down, and the room falls into complete darkness. Anne closes her eyes, the weight of the day lifting from her mind as she drifts into sleep. In the morning, she will awaken to the same routine, rising early, attending to the needs of the household, and continuing her education as a noblewoman. Her days will be filled with prayers, responsibilities, and social interactions. Her life is dictated by the expectations of her status, but within the confines of this structure, there are moments of personal reflection and solitude. This quiet night, in the warmth of her bed and the stillness of her chamber, is a rare opportunity for Anne to consider the future that awaits her. It will be one of new roles and responsibilities as she transitions from daughter to wife, from young woman to matriarch of her own household. Rituals and routines of her life will continue, and her place in the world will remain, as ever, dictated by the duties of her position. The night passes slowly, and as the first light of dawn peeks through the thick velvet curtains, Anne begins to stir. The fire has long since burned out, and the cold morning air greets her as she slowly opens her eyes. She rises, dresses, and prepares for another day, one full of duties, responsibilities, and, perhaps, new encounters. Yet in the quiet moments before the morning begins, Anne reflects on the day ahead and the future she is about to step into. The balance of work, family, and tradition will shape her path, and she is ready to take the next step forward, confident in her place within the grand tapestry of Tudor life.